Well, we're having this conversation on a day when the president of Colombia is meeting with President Obama, accepting the declaration that we're going to move ahead with a free trade agreement with Colombia, which was held up for quite some time. Are those labor guarantees, basically, will stop killing trade union leaders, enough, Geoff?
Well, I don't want to open up a big debate in the last minute of the show, but I think our point of view is it's very positive that Santos is committed to these steps. I think from our point of view, we should wait and see if they are implemented before we move ahead with the trade deal.
So not against trade deals in general, but you
No, the question is, do you guarantee labor rights and do you address a series of social problems in connection with this? And good words are one thing and actions are another. And we haven't seen those yet.
Why are the countries in the region addressing these free trade agreements as so critical? Have they really made a big difference for the countries involved? Peru wants one, Chile has had one, Central American countries are saying yes, us too. Why are these so important and have they really worked?
When you have a country that doesn't have, as Brazil, a big potential middle class, a huge internal market, China, for instance, they can keep growing, India. But you have countries in Latin America, 20 million, 30 million, 10 million, 5 million. You need to be inserted in the world. The issue is how you do it in a way that helps everyone within the country and not just exporting one commodity that stays in the hands of one big company and the rest of the country's bad. So we need to export. That's essential. We need to specialize, and therefore education and technology is critical. But you need to have policies towards income distribution, towards social inclusion, towards social mobility, so that these countries strengthen their democracies. You cannot have a democracy with those levels of inequality. And that's where China enters into the picture. China is a big partner now. We are exporting a lot. The U.S. is becoming, I think, very, very much preoccupied also of that because of the presence of China in Latin America. But could we just export raw materials and commodities to China? That's enough? No, it's not enough. So we have to rethink, and that's why the partnership with the U.S., if the U.S. provides and delivers science, technology, education, could be a good way out.
That's one of the benefits of trade agreements, though, too. It's not just on the commercial side. It actually helps countries reform through transparency, through anti-corruption, through things that strengthen democratic institutions in the region. And we would argue actually also encourage positive steps on human rights, also encourage positive steps on labor reforms in this. And that's not something that the Chinese investment model brings to the region or frankly brings to Africa or other things. So there's a broader policy component here that goes well beyond the exchange of goods and services, which is important, critically important, and particularly if it's done in a way that engages the entire economy so that everybody has access to the global economy. That's critically important. But there are these broader policy issues that are often overlooked in the context of trade because, as you will hear from some of the Central Americans, for example, who negotiated with the United States on CAFTA, or the Peruvians who negotiated with the United States on their bilateral trade agreement, they say that the negotiation process helped them to make domestic reforms that they wanted to make anyway, but were too politically complicated to be able to do. And it was by having this negotiation process with the United States to be able to say, well, we need to do that in order to get this trade agreement, that they were then able to make those reforms domestically on the transparency and government, good governance that we have been pushing, we, the United States, have been pushing many in the region to take for many, many years. Again, if you have that as one model and you have the Chinese investment model, which is to say, give us your goods and then go away, and we don't particularly care about some of the positive externalities like labor reforms and concern for the environment and job creation on the local economy and all these things that the Western investment model does tend to bring, then you've set up two different poles in the region, and it's going to be really interesting over time to see how the region reacts to those divergent views. I would argue the supremacy of the Western investment model, but that in some cases is an open question in Latin America, and we're going to have to see how that transpires over the years.
Quickly.
Just very quickly, I mean, I agree with that. I want to say, though, there aren't only two models here, and that the U.S. has pursued a different model in its trade relations with different countries, and that Brazil and the United States, for example, trade relations are different than the model that's been developed in Central America or Mexico. So there's a range there.
Yeah, we export to the United States value-added manufactured finished products. We export to China raw materials, basic products. Actually, there are criticisms now, as President Dilma prepares to go to China, that we have developed a new colonial relationship with China, Brazil and China. And that's the type of the relationship that most countries in the region have with China. It's a major challenge in terms of free trade agreements, etc. Brazil, I think, is not very concerned with that vis-a-vis the United States. What Brazil would like to see is the United States to liberalize its trade in certain areas where Brazil is especially competitive. At the same time, there are challenges internally in Brazil in order to make Brazil more efficient, more competitive, where Brazil also has to reform.